One missile, one launch, one target on a radar screen. That is how missile defense has always worked. One missile in, one interceptor out. You shoot it down. You move on. Iran just broke that equation. On March 1st, 2026, something streaked across the sky over central Israel that stopped Israeli Air Force analysts cold. Footage from the ground showed not one object descending, but 24, fragments of light scattering across the night sky like a firework gone wrong. Except these weren't fireworks. Each one of those fragments was a submunition, a smaller bomb carrying 2.5 kilograms of high explosive, independently falling across an 8-kilometer radius of densely populated Israeli territory. One missile, 24 bombs, 8 kilometers of blast radius, and the defense systems designed to stop it? They were built to shoot down one thing at a time. This is the story of Iran's cluster missile. The weapon that doesn't just strike a target, it multiplies. The weapon that is already reshaping how Israel, the United States, and every defense ministry in the world thinks about missile defense. Stay with me, because this one matters. Let's start with the basics, because the terminology matters and the media has been sloppy about it. There are two different technologies in this story, and they are often confused. Understanding the difference is understanding the threat. The first is a cluster bomb warhead. A cluster bomb is a containered warhead that, upon reaching its target area, opens in midair and scatters dozens or hundreds of smaller explosives, called bomblets or submunitions, over a wide zone. Those submunitions are unguided. They do not have their own propulsion. They simply fall to the ground across whatever area the parent missile was descending over, designed to explode on impact. Think of it like a shotgun shell versus a rifle round. A rifle fires one bullet at one target. A shotgun shell fires dozens of pellets across a wide area. Iran's cluster warhead missile is the shotgun of ballistic weapons. According to the Israel Defense Forces, Iran's cluster warhead missiles open up on descent and scatter between 24 and up to 80 submunitions, each carrying approximately 2.5 kilograms of explosives, across a radius of around 8 kilometers. That is roughly the size of the island of Manhattan. One missile, one launch, one radar track, and suddenly 80 separate explosions are distributed across 8 kilometers of urban territory. The second technology is a MIRV, multiple independently targetable reentry vehicle. This is something more sophisticated and more alarming. A MIRV-equipped missile carries several precision-guided warheads, each with its own guidance system. After the missile's main rockets burn out, an onboard bus maneuvers in space, releasing each warhead on a separate, independently calculated trajectory aimed at entirely different targets, potentially dozens or hundreds of kilometers apart. MIRVs were developed by the United States in the early 1970s on the Minuteman III ICBM. They revolutionized nuclear strategy precisely because they forced defenders to launch one interceptor for each incoming warhead. A single MIRVed missile carrying 5 warheads compels the defender to fire 5 interceptors, or accept that one warhead slips through. Today, confirmed MIRV systems exist in the hands of 5 nuclear powers: the United States, Russia, China, France, and the United Kingdom. India is moving toward deployment. Pakistan and North Korea claim tests, but independent analysts say the evidence for truly independently targetable warheads is inconclusive. And then there's Iran. Iran has periodically claimed MIRV capability for some of its medium-range missiles. 2 systems are most often cited. The Khorramshahr-4, nicknamed K-Bar, is a liquid-fueled ballistic missile with a reported range of 2,000 kilometers and a payload capacity of up to 1,500 kilograms. That is a significant payload. Iranian state media have claimed it can strike up to 80 targets by dispensing multiple warheads. The IRGC launched a Khorramshahr-4 at Tel Aviv during the current conflict, and according to reports, there were fires and damage at multiple locations simultaneously. The Fajr 3 is an earlier project that Iranian leaders claimed could hit several targets simultaneously, though technical details remain limited. Here is what the evidence actually shows, and the distinction matters. After the March 1st strike on Israel, IDF analysts recovered dozens of unexploded canisters and opened an inquiry into whether Iran's arsenal includes true MIRV capability, meaning independently guided, separately targeted warheads, or whether what they are seeing is an advanced cluster warhead that creates multiple radar tracks and multiple impact points without each warhead having independent guidance. As of now, U.S. and Israeli intelligence assessments report no confirmed evidence of an operational Iranian MIRV system, meaning warheads that can independently adjust their trajectory after separation to hit different targets. But here's the critical point that defense analysts are now making explicitly: it doesn't fully matter. Whether Iran has true MIRVs or advanced cluster warheads with dozens of submunitions, the operational effect on missile defense is almost identical, and that is the part of this story that should alarm every American watching this. Missile defense is fundamentally an economic and mathematical problem. Every interceptor costs money. Patriot missiles cost approximately $4 million each. That interceptors run between $10 and $12 million per shot. Arrow 3, Israel's most advanced exo-atmospheric interceptor, costs approximately $2 to $3 million per round. The Iranian Khorramshahr 4, the missile carrying the cluster warhead, costs approximately $1 million to produce. Do the math. Iran fires one $1 million missile. That missile descends toward Israeli territory and releases 24 to 80 submunitions, each one generating its own radar track, its own threat signature, its own intercept requirement. Defense systems have to evaluate each track. They have to decide, in seconds, under pressure, with imperfect information, which tracks are real warheads and which are decoys or submunitions. If the defender tries to intercept everything, they spend $4 million per Patriot interceptor, times 24 or more tracks. That is potentially $96 million in interceptors to respond to a $1 million missile. If the defender tries to be selective, to conserve interceptors by only engaging the tracks most likely to be real warheads, they risk letting something through. This is the doctrine that Iranian engineers have built into these weapons. As analysts at Defense Security Asia put it, the attacker's objective is not necessarily to guarantee penetration with every launch. The objective is to create a situation where defensive uncertainty causes interceptor expenditure, converting caution into a strategic liability. And it is already working. Let's talk about what this weapon has already done in the real world. Not in a war game, not in an analyst's report, but on the ground in central Israel over the past week. The IDF confirmed that Iran launched multiple ballistic missiles, carrying cluster bomb warheads at Israel several times since Operation Epic Fury began on February 28th. Iran also used these same weapons in the June 2025 conflict, so this is not a new capability debut. This is an established operational doctrine. On Tuesday, March 3rd, submunitions from a cluster bomb warhead hit several locations in central Israel. 12 people were wounded. The damage from each individual submunition was comparable to a small rocket. Footage from Sunday, March 1st showed 24 fragments streaking through the sky after a cluster bomb warhead opened mid-descent and scattered its payload across central Israel. That footage is what triggered the IDF inquiry into whether Iran might also have true MIRV capability, because the multiple tracks looked from the ground like something more sophisticated than a conventional cluster bomb. The IDF reiterated its home front command guidelines. Israeli civilians must shelter not just when a warning siren sounds, but remain in shelter longer than usual, because submunitions can continue falling across a wide area even after the main missile impact. The Houthis in Yemen, Iran's proxy force, also launched several missiles with cluster bomb warheads at Israel during the June 2025 war. The doctrine is spreading across Iran's entire proxy network. This is not a weapon Iran reserves for high-value military targets. It is a weapon designed for dense urban territory, designed to scatter explosives across as wide an area as possible, indiscriminately. The United States has spent approximately $300 billion building the most sophisticated layered missile defense architecture in human history. Patriot systems for terminal interception, engaging missiles in their final descent phase. THAAD, terminal high altitude area defense for upper atmospheric engagement. Arrow 3, Israel's exo-atmospheric layer, co-developed with the United States. This system was designed to stop limited ballistic missile salvos from adversaries like North Korea or Iran firing conventional single warhead missiles. It was not designed to handle unlimited track multiplication generated by cluster warhead, submunitions, and penetration aid swarms. Each layer relies on rapid sensor fusion, the ability to combine radar data, track signatures, and threat assessments to determine what to engage and when. The Iranian cluster warhead doctrine is specifically designed to overload this process, release the submunitions at the phase where classification certainty is lowest, flood the radar picture with tracks, force the system to make engagement decisions faster than interceptors can be replenished. The vulnerability is not in any single layer of the defense. The vulnerability is in the magazine. You can only carry so many interceptors. Once they are expended, they cannot be replaced instantaneously. The Patriot battery defending a base fires its interceptors. It takes time to resupply. During that window, if Iran fires again, the defense is degraded. This is not theoretical. This is the doctrine that has already been operationally validated in this conflict, and the doctrine that killed 6 Americans in a shipping container in Kuwait when a drone got through a degraded defense. So the real question that every defense ministry in the world is now asking is this: how close is Iran to a true MIRV system? Let me give you the honest answer, because this is an area where the gap between Iranian claims and verified capability is significant, and precision matters. Confirmed operational MIRV systems exist in 5 countries: the United States, Russia, China, France, and the United Kingdom. These are all nuclear powers. Russia demonstrated a conventionally armed MIRV system on its Orishnik intermediate-range ballistic missile in November 2024, the first combat use of a MIRV system in history, fired at the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. Iran's Khorramshahr-4 has a payload capacity of 1,500 kilograms, large enough to carry not just a primary warhead, but a suite of submunitions, penetration aids, and potentially future MIRV components. The liquid propulsion system allows it to loft heavy payloads over medium distances while preserving space for complex dispensing mechanisms. Iranian state media claim the K-bar can strike up to 80 targets. International analysts say these figures may be aspirational, but even a reduced estimate implies dozens of simultaneous radar tracks requiring defensive engagement. The THAAD family of missiles, Iran's newest hypersonic-capable designs, has reported maneuverability at high speeds that could complement a MIRV bus by introducing post-separation trajectory variation that challenges interceptor prediction algorithms. The bottom line from analysts: true independently guided MIRV capability has not been publicly demonstrated by Iran. No verified flight test footage shows an Iranian missile releasing separately guided re-entry vehicles. But the operational effect of Iran's current cluster warhead systems already imposes many of the same defensive challenges, and the engineering pathway from advanced cluster warheads to true MIRV capability is shorter than the pathway from single warhead missiles. There is one dimension of this story that almost nobody in mainstream media is covering, and it deserves to be on the record. Cluster munitions are banned under international law for the 111 countries that have signed the Convention on Cluster Munitions, adopted in 2008. The reason they are banned is exactly what we have been describing. Submunitions scatter indiscriminately. They do not distinguish between military targets and civilians, and critically, a significant percentage of cluster bomblets fail to explode on initial impact and remain as de facto landmines for years or decades afterward, killing and maiming civilians long after the conflict ends. Countries that have signed and ratified the convention cannot use, produce, transfer, or stockpile cluster munitions. The notable non-signatories include Iran, Israel, the United States, Russia, China. None of the major parties to the current conflict are bound by the ban, and the United States itself supplied cluster munitions to Ukraine in 2023, establishing a precedent it cannot easily criticize others for following. But for civilians living in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, in every city within range of Iran's ballistic missiles, the legal status of the weapon is a footnote. What matters is that a missile they cannot see, traveling at hypersonic speed, opens up above their city and scatters explosives across an area the size of Manhattan while they run for shelter. Here's the summary of what Iran's cluster missile actually represents. It is not the most expensive weapon in this war. At approximately $1 million per missile, it is cheaper than the interceptors deployed to stop it. It is not the most destructive weapon in this war. Individual submunitions carry 2.5 kilograms of explosive, comparable to a small rocket. What it is the most mathematically efficient weapon in this war. One launch, one radar track on initial detection, then mid-descent, 24 to 80 separate objects, each one requiring a defensive decision. Each defensive decision costing millions of dollars in interceptors. Each interceptor expended, bringing the magazine closer to empty. The United States has spent $300 billion building missile defenses designed for a different threat model. The Patriot, the THAAD, the Arrow 3, all of them were designed to intercept single warheads one at a time. The cluster warhead doctrine exploits the gap between that design assumption and current Iranian capability. And Iran is watching the exchange ratios. It knows that for every $1 million missile it fires, the defender spends between $10 million and $100 million in responses. It knows that magazines run dry. It knows that a defense system with empty interceptor racks is not a defense system. The MIRV question, whether Iran has or is developing truly independently guided re-entry vehicles, is the next chapter of this story. The engineering pathway from what Iran is doing today to what Russia did in Dnipro in November 2024 is not as long as it was 5 years ago. And the countries watching most carefully are not just Israel. They are Taiwan, they are Japan, they are South Korea. Every nation that relies on American missile defense guarantees is now running new calculations about what those guarantees are worth against a cluster warhead doctrine that the $300 billion shield was not designed to handle. Iran fired a $1 million missile and turned one attack into hundreds. The Pentagon is working on the answer. The question is whether the answer arrives before the next salvo does. If this video gave you something to think about, hit subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to understand what is actually happening in this war. I'll see you in the next one.